Welcome to Doc Walks. Doing things a little different this time. Ben is out for this episode, so it's just going to be me, Keith Maitland, in a long-form conversation with visiting filmmakers, husband and wife duo, Amanda McBaine and Jesse Moss. And we're not even walking. This is a sit-down, long-form interview courtesy of Austin Film Society, who are welcoming Jesse and Amanda to present their new film, Middletown, at Doc Days here in Austin. So I hope you will stick around for a long-ranging conversation. We're going to be talking about one of their first major films, The Overnighters, and how that changed their career. We're going to be talking about Boys State and a little bit about Girls State. And of course, we're going to be talking about Middletown, the new film from Amanda McBaine and Jesse Moss.
On your left.
You're listening to Doc Walks with Ben and Keith. Amanda McBaine and Jesse Moss. I'm glad we've had a chance to spend 36 hours together to get to know each other, so I don't feel stupid for being dumb at the beginning of the conversation. Yes, we've shared some tacos several times. You've shared your film with a live audience here in Austin last night. How did that feel? I know you premiered Middletown at Sundance, and it sounds like you've had a few opportunities to show it, but what does it feel like?
Well, what's exciting is the world's changing so fast too, and you make a film and you don't know the moment that it will meet when it comes into the world. And Sundance was one moment. In fact, I'm not even sure Trump was inaugurated.
Just 2 days later.
2 days later, but a lot's happened in the last 100 days. So I think that's part of the experience and the joy and the thrill and the terror of taking the film out is. Where is the audience? What are they feeling, and how do we both meet that with the movie, but also in conversation about the movie?
I think it's also a thrill for us always with any film to share it in a theater with people. But we especially like with this one because there's some laughs. There's this one joke about New Jersey, and I just never know if there's going to be a state finally that doesn't have a thing for New Jersey, and there has so far not. So Missouri, Texas, California, Utah, everybody thinks New Jersey is funny.
As a native New Jerseyan, I was slightly offended by how quick the audience was to pounce on that joke last night.
I've had to apologize, for that to people from New Jersey and say that we've made good work about New Jersey that painted in a much more benevolent light.
What is the difference for you between being at a premiere or on the circuit or even in wide release versus knowing that your movie is out there on Apple TV or on Netflix or wherever it lives?
Well, first of all, to be honest, we're just not sure if the movie is going to make its way into the wider world. So we're appreciating every opportunity we are given to share the film with people. And as filmmakers, I think I speak for both of us in saying like that is the ultimate experience for me, to share it with an audience in a dark theater. That's what I live for. I liken the streaming experience, and going back to linear cable, it's like dropping a pebble down a well and listening for something faint, maybe if you're lucky, right? So abstract and kind of unfulfilling. And yet I will feel unfulfilled if it's not available to people to find in their homes, on their devices. But I don't know what to do about that.
I mean, things have changed. Also, we've been in this business for a really, 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 really long time. And now, you do, when you go wide on Apple or Nat Geo or whatever it is, you do get some responses if you're in a room full of people, and that's kind of great because that's what you want to communicate. You want to connect. Like I partly make films as a bridge-making exercise, empathy generation, whatever it is, and to see people respond for good or for bad. I also like the bad reviews. I'm like, that's great. That's fascinating that I at least provoke some feeling.
I feel the same kind of duality as far as there's nothing like being in the room, right? They call it a movie theater, and it is a theatrical experience. It is, it's not Broadway, but yet when you're in a room full of an audience reacting all at the same time, it sure feels like there's an energy in the space, and the players aren't on the screen, they're in the space with you. And at the same time, as a movie fan, the overwhelming majority of religious experiences I've had watching films, the filmmaker is nowhere near the space that I was. So we've all had that experience, right, of being in the audience without the filmmaker, that bridge making you're talking about, right? The bridge is there even if, as the bridge builder, you don't necessarily get the... Well, let's go back through, we talked about maybe walking down memory lane a little bit. Over the last couple of days, we've talked about the Overnighters, talked about Boys State and Girls State, and of course we're talking a lot about Middletown. I guess what I want to know is where you both got started and it's a two-pronged question. What is the gateway drug film that got you excited about docs? And then what did you do with that? What was the first thing you made that felt like that?
And this relates to what you were just saying too, which is I'm thinking back to my early theater-going, film-going experiences, and my father's a big movie fan, and I remember he took us to a double feature at the Castro Theater in San Francisco, big movie palace, and it was Errol Morris's Gates of Heaven and a film called Hardware Wars by Ernie Ford Fesalius, which is a real obscurity. And if you're into Star Wars, check it out. Crazy double feature, probably 1982, 83, I'm thinking. And that double feature is like seared into me. And the director wasn't there, or directors, but I think it was sort of implanted something that sort of propelled me forward into this art form. And if you think about that mashup of Errol Morris, of Gates of Heaven in particular, and Hardware Wars, which is a parody, ludicrous parody. I'd like to think my work is somewhere in between. But there's not a straight line from that experience to making work. Actually, for me, seeing a film by Christine Choi called Who Killed Vincent Chin in the early 90s, such a powerful film. I was not in film at the time. I was in politics. But somebody introduced me to Christine, and I said, I want to do what you do. This is an incredible piece of political art. And she said, okay, well, help me out with something, and then we can talk. And so that sort of led me into documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I also had a winding path. I was actually working in advertising and corporate identity, which sort of in the advertising way was very much like, how can we connect with people, but for different reasons. And at some point, we were all sitting around like a banquet table pondering a Pantone yellow, and people were so passionate about it, and they were so creative, and we were drawing all kinds of stuff. So it was a very creative job, but I was like, something's missing here, like the people, like I need people stories. And so I went to like a summer 6-week class at NYU and learned about Maya Deren. It was more for fiction, but at some point I ran across or I was shown, or someone shared the film Brother's Keeper by Bruce Sinofsky and Joe Berlinger. And if any of you haven't seen it, it's bananas and amazing. And it just totally cracked open for me what I didn't know, that documentary could be so many things, right? I didn't know much about documentary. I hadn't seen some of the great works. I only knew Ken Burns, right? And so, or PBS. And to me, that was the first movie, Brother's Keeper, that just was like, oh, it has all the stuff of fiction, these incredible characters, this incredible drama, all the setting, like, and just how it's built. Really beautiful. And so I, like, the next day went and tried to find an internship at a documentary house. And of course, all the work they did was for PBS. So it was like perfect. And they were very academic and very intellectual. And it was an amazing journey in terms of investigative, kind of more on the journalistic end. And then there was sort of an explosion of cable. And so we were all making a lot of work, and I got promoted pretty fast. So.
And what was your promoted through the ranks from, I'm assuming, kind of a research, entry-level intern up to what?
I mean, I
What
interned
roles did you
for
have?
a short period of time, like not getting paid, and then I got paid, and then AP, associate producer, then co-producer, then I co-produced for a long time, probably too long.
I would love to know the story of how y'all met and how your relationship turned into a professional partnership.
We are very much a documentary union, which is interesting, maybe not unusual, but I'm sure many people have met through documentary and partnered in life and work. But a filmmaker named Brett Morgan, who I was working with, Brett and his partner then, Nanette Burstein, made a great boxing film called On the Ropes. And I was enlisted to work on that film. And that was my production education. I was production audio and an associate producer on that film. It was a Verité film about a boxing gym in Bed-Stuy. And I was single, and Brett, through somebody he was dating, met Amanda, who was also in documentary and also single. And then Brett, being a kind of a matchmaker in a great tradition, was like, I'm going to set you guys up. And we went to see There's Something About Mary at the drive-in in Westbury, Long Island, all together, a double date. Then we went to the racetrack that like maybe 2 weekends later.
No,
Second.
it was the same night. It was
No,
like same weekend.
different date.
Oh.
Sorry, your memory's faulty. We connected. We were both new to documentary and loved what we were doing, and that was Brett still taking credit for our creative relationship. And
10%, I imagine.
Yeah, Brett definitely extracted a pound of flesh. He made most recently Moon Age Daydream and The Kid Stays in the Picture and Kurt Montage of Heck, and Brett's a great filmmaker and still inspires us and terrifies us. And Brett was shooting on the ropes and really good shooter, and I was doing audio. As I was learning how to hold the boom, if I held it incorrectly, Brett would kick me. But it's a good way to learn how to do it, how not to dip the boom into the shot, right? And actually the value of good audio, right? That's what I learned in production immediately. Brett told me that he's like, anytime you shoot Verité, make sure they're lav. And the opening scene of Speedo is kind of amazing, and it only works because he's laved. And otherwise, I'm lazy. Who wants to bother with that? But that was a great lesson. So that's the story of our union.
Now, Amanda, your turn. What did he get wrong?
I mean, I have terrible memory, so whatever he said works for me. I do remember, I was just talking to a bunch of college kids, and they wanted to know like how to break into the business, and they're a lot, younger, whatever. But I was like, practically speaking, like the fact that I could do sound and own that line in a budget, in addition to being your AP, was really how I got work. To be able to kind of be a double duty kind of person. I mean, in some cases, like a triple or quadruple duty person. Sometimes we've made films where we're the only two people, but everybody figures out what they can handle. And often with documentary, it's like almost everything, right?
I love that. Everyone figures out what they can handle, and many people underestimate what they can handle.
Yeah.
And it's the people who throw themselves in the deep end that realize, like, sometimes you have to overextend yourself to realize, like, oh, I wore 5 hats and 4 is the limit. But if you stop at 1, you don't know what you can accomplish.
Yeah, my first job for Christine Choi, I was associate producer, but not qualified for the position. And she had me I was doing archive licensing, and it was a tricky film. And I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what I was doing. And she fired me. It was like my first job in documentary, and I got fired. She's like, "You're fired." I'd never been fired in my life. It was a Friday, and I called the editor. I think he asked me to do something. I was like, "I'm fired." And he's like, "You know what? Wait till Monday and see what happens." And she was the kind of person who would fire you Friday and hire you back Monday. And I've actually never had a boss like that. And yeah, that was the hazard of wearing too many hats.
Yeah, I didn't realize Christine was the Scott Rudin of the documentary.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love her, but she's a terror.
Yeah. Between her and Brett Morgan, I'm a little scared. Okay, that's how y'all met. And you went out to the racetrack and you realized, this is a love connection, and I'm so glad. Where was the professional connection, and how did you take that professional partnership to the next level? When was the first time you said, we're not going to work in service to other people, we're going to work in service to either each other or together? Was
The Overnighters really the first Just Us? You made some... Con Man. I mean, you did a lot of stuff.
I think it was important to me. Like I think we connected because we love this art form. But I had these incredible mentors as bosses, and I loved it. And I think to some extent, like the practice of documentary is still a kind of guild, and you apprentice to somebody whose work you admire and respect, and you learn from them. And I worked at the knee of some great filmmakers and learned a lot, but not really how to direct. I learned how to be a good producer, and I had to break free. And so therefore, it was really important for me early in our career, I think for quite a while, to sort of flex my independence. And that meant from our creative partnership, and it was like perfectly natural and comfortable that we not co-direct or even closely collaborate on movies together. I think that's why I think it took a long time to discover that we were, capable of things we couldn't do alone. And I had to kind of get past my ego in some way.
Has he succeeded in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly that, but also, I mean, every film sort of fits into the moment. I think we talked about sort of the world moment, but also like your life moment. Like, what are you working out, either creatively or formally or whatever it is? And for where I was in life too, we have 2 kids, and I'm gonna be really honest, like, I did not want to be in the field. I'm happiest in the edit room. And so when we moved to California in 2000, whatever that was, 12, we had these little kids, and the business was in kind of a weird, we were in just that weird, like, who are we and what is documentary and why do we tell stories, and, you know, having a whatever crisis of faith moment. And I think that's when we heard of this story up in North Dakota that seemed pretty wild. And whoever sent you up there to sort of do a spec shoot on like Roughnecks, and you went up there and you came back with this amazing footage of this guy, this pastor up there that they rejected because it was too soulful. But we looked at it and we're like, oh, no one's going to fund this. But this feels like we need to go back to this place of like, let's make an independent documentary. This is too important.
Just the overnighters.
Yeah. And so he went and shot that by himself, you know, once a month. He'd go up there for a week, live in this church, film Verité by himself, that kind of thing. You know, and this is halfway into our careers, right? Like, so I think, and I did not want to be in the field, and there's value to that. So that was that film, right? I had that relationship where I was a creative producer. I watched every frame. We talked while he was in the field, and boy, did he need a lot of guidance because it was a tricky shoot every time he went up there. And then the edit became just a slog of like insanity. And of course, that was like the biggest Hail Mary, and it ended up being a game changer for us.
Your career changed in that moment. How did it change? And like, how did you feel that change?
That film, because it got into Sundance, we did actually get funding to finish from Impact, who we did not have a connection with before, because they knew we were going to Sundance. They're like, oh, okay, we'll you know, give you this money so that you can finish to go to Sundance, because that's a thing. But yeah, to know that we together had this powerful connection over this very hard to make film, and that we were going to make it through anything creatively if we could make it through that.
I love, that's an incredible use of partnership, right? Like as a married couple with a young family, confronting making your own bones in this in a career that's undeniably impossible to figure out for anybody. How did having that kind of foundation at home feel to you?
We have a sort of joke of low moments in documentary, and there are many. And one was, I took a picture of my checking account balance was $8, and I was like, well, there's nowhere to go but up. And we shoot this amazing footage, and I'd be like, now we're going to get money for 18 fucking months. Like, I'd shoot amazing Verité footage, great scenes. I was like, this is dynamite, this is solid gold. No. And in a way, I think we sort of call back to that experience because of the degree of risk. You know, as you get older and more sort of important for us to remind ourselves that like the work we're proudest of, the most meaningful work happened on the edge. Sometimes, you know, you have to not be deterred when people don't believe in your project. There's so much rejection. And that's 16 years into our career, you know, and like sort of feeling like we got nothing to lose, you know, and this feels deeply meaningful. And in some ways, like, beginning of my career was pretty charmed in a way, like moved quickly, and I found people who mentored me, and I was like, oh, this is coming quick and coming easily, and then it kind of imploded. And then there was periods of time in that decade where we were not doing meaningful work, and so, you know, we sort of had to do what we could do to stay working in film. Just calling back to the early days, those relationships like Brett and the people I met in the first few years of documentary are still really meaningful for us, and creative collaborators in the work we do. And it's a pretty small community. And I not that we don't bring new partners, and love to bring new partners like Chris Pasick, who cut Middletown, into our small family. But that was really meaningful to, you know, the people that we met early.
Yeah, I mean, when people ask us for advice, I never come up with good stuff, except for the one thing that I wished someone had told me. If you do find somebody that you connect with and it's sort of easy, hold on to that person, right? Like, you know, we continue to go back to some of the same editors over and over and over again, even though the projects are so fundamentally different, because our language it just makes sense, because sometimes it doesn't work. Like on Middletown, I'll be very frank and say we had an editor who we started with, who we'd never worked with before. Because he was local in the Bay Area, we thought, oh, we should finally work with someone who's like in the same space as us, and that'd be great for our creative process. And it was a bad fit. You know, I don't know how many weeks in, we had to part ways, right? And that's very hard for me, because I don't like that feeling. And then we found Chris, right? So being true to like what is the discomfort that is productive and what's the discomfort that's like, it's a bad relationship.
I used to have this conception that there would be these perfect unions. And I learned actually pretty early on, particularly with editors, but also with other collaborators, that of course, you're going to see me through to the finish line. And actually, often that's not the case. And what do you do about that? And at what point do you call it? We actually sort of fought about this on Middletown and our first collaboration with our editor, because it was like, how long do we go here? And we're burning money fast, and we have nothing to show for it. And maybe that's the failures on our part, right? So that's tough.
There's, from my experience and for what I've seen, there's lots of worlds within this world. But from a big picture view, there's kind of two worlds. There's people that are visible and people that can feel invisible. Mm-hmm. And even sometimes when you've become visible, you feel invisible again. But that experience that you had with the Overnighters and getting that validation of Sundance and, like you said, meeting funders, suddenly people who wouldn't answer emails or wouldn't recognize your name in their inbox are willing to give you the 15 minutes or the 45 minutes to make your case for the next one. Mm-hmm. And that is a narrow entryway. Like not many are granted access to that entryway. What's the key? What's the secret to get on the other side of that door?
Well, people started bringing us stuff, right? That's what happened after the Overnighters. Like, The Bandit was brought to us, right? Like, I don't think that had happened a whole lot before that point.
Yeah, but not so.
New.
Yeah,
so then you're starting
so
to say no, which feels like an irresponsible thing to do, because you're like, we need to work.
I don't know. Something I remind myself of too is it did, as Amanda mentioned, it came out of a different project, which was I was sent up there by Nat Geo to the North Dakota oil field to scout for a reality TV show about roughnecks. They immediately abandoned that project. You're like, your footage is not what we want. But I was like, I found this story, and for a while, I was like, oh shit, who owns this footage? Like, they paid for it, I shot it. I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna make this thing. And that was important. But the lesson there for me was sometimes say yes to things that aren't perfect, just to keep working, going back to getting kicked by Brett, doing production audio. It's like, okay, it's not perfect, but I'm out here making work, right?
Yeah. Oh, fuck it is, an ethos that you can build an entire career around. I asked you what the key was to get to the other side of that door, because I want to share. It can feel so daunting. And I will tell you, 20 years into my career, I've never played a film at Sundance. My friend Ben, who's over there, we talk about all the time, he's never played a film at Sundance. We know that validation, especially people right around the same age as you, who grew up inspired by the 90s indie film boom. But what's the key to getting on the other side of the door? And I think you said it, I just want to reflect it. To me, the key is to make something undeniable, or something that makes a difference, something that people can't look away from.
I think we've done it in two films, and both it took enormous risk in different ways. And Boy State being the other film, which really opened the door to much more of a kind of Hollywood ecosystem and more substantial, but often not good projects coming to us. And with Boy State, the risk was not 18 months of unsupported production about what felt like an obscure story, but Boy State, a lot of money, a very contained production, but totally unpredictable. Most likely it won't work, and we'll just burn through somebody's pile of cash quickly.
It was very high risk, high reward, because it is a 1 week thing. And if you don't it's not a longitudinal documentary like The Overnighters, where we could keep shooting until we, the question with documentary, when are you done shooting? Well, people's lives keep continuing and they keep changing, and why not film forever? We did not have that problem on this film. It was, you got it or you don't. And either it stays a simulation and kind of BS and doesn't sort of resonate in any kind of meaningful way, or it does something else. And I think, fortunately, Concordia was kind of new and excited about taking that risk with us. But, to put a lot of money into a Verité film where you really don't know what's going to happen. And also, we've never actually seen the Boy State experience, right? And the first hour of when we actually got to the event, or maybe the first half a day, is a lot of info download about what is government. And it's just, anyway, it's kids in a classroom listening to a teacher. And I was like, we are so effed. This is so boring. this is the worst film I've ever made, right? We're screwed. And like, of course, like the producers are like, check in and let us know how everything's going. And we're like, I'm not talking to them today because this is bad. And whatever. It all worked out, but.
I mean, there was a moment on the Overnighters where blatant production where I showed up following this guy and his life just blows up in front of me. But I showed up and he was like, my life's blowing up. And I knew that like it would require a lot of fortitude to push through that door and to film what was happening around him. And because it was really painful. And it just took me into like unstable territory, like ethically, to be honest. And I do think the form is problematic. You know, and I think like acknowledging that, I think we sort of sometimes don't talk more openly about that fact, for example, and I'm not the first person to point this out, but to ask people to sign a release form at the beginning of a project in which they have no idea what, you know, will happen or what they're actually giving you is unethical to some degree. The discomfort is built in, and sometimes our instinct for most of us is to sometimes lean away from what is uncomfortable, but
that ends up being the mic drops often,
Yeah.
right? Like those real, like we all know that from real life too. Like the spicy stuff is really the stuff that does make us kind of like either cry or lean in or freak out, whatever. I think that we talk about this a lot in terms of objectivity or journalism, and it comes up a little bit in Middletown. You know, you sort of see in the beginning you want to do journalism. By the end, he's calling himself a crusader. And you know, how does documentary relate to journalism? And that there are all these rules with journalism, right? And they're like codified somewhere. I don't know. I didn't go to journalism school, but with documentary, you're kind of making up the rules. Like, are you a good person? Are you creating good boundaries? And I think for us with this sort of like release form, you know, the back end of that is we're going to share this rough cut with you. The idea at the end is that you all are going to stand on stage with us. We're going to have made a film that is collaborative in the sense that you see yourself reflected in a real way or authentic way, and we're all going to be doing this together in the rollout of the movie, right? But that rough cut moment is really interesting. With Boys State, you know, it being teenagers, there was sort of an added layer of like, we need to have, you know, I used my parenting tools. There's so many skills that I had from not filmmaking that I was putting into play in that film. Why am I saying that?
I don't know. I'll tell you, I was planning on this whole talk being about Boys State in Middletown.
Okay.
And really the focus on like working with teenagers, you know, today in Boys State, and working with the idea of teenagers from the past, the limitations of the 1 week shoot with Boys State, the limitations of an archival shoot, which is, you know, watching your film feels fairly unlimited for the amount of archival you had to play with, but still, archival comes to an end at some point, and it isn't designed to fit together into a great movie, right? So that's what I expected to talk about. I'm glad what we've been talking about is, I think, much more interesting, although I'm very interested in those subjects too, because it is about who you are. You just said something. Amanda, I feel like you, I actually enjoy spending time in the edit more than I like getting up on the sunny day and getting out there with the camera.
Yeah.
And like you, I didn't go to journalism school, and I've used those exact lines. Those are my lines. I don't know what the ethics of journalism are, and I don't want to know because I don't want to have to follow somebody else's rules. I follow my own rule, right? I set my own course.
Yeah.
But it boils down to exactly what you just said. Like, what is your personal ethic, and how do you feel about yourself as a person when the film is done? Mm-hmm. You've asked these people to let you into their lives. Right. You've asked them to share and to be vulnerable. And at the end, you're also asking them to trust you that you're going to take care with that. At the end, you have to stand there at the Q&A, and I've never made a movie where the people were mad at me at the end, as far as I know. It doesn't seem like you guys have either.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, not the subjects, but the people around them.
We are takers on some level. That is what we're doing. It's someone else's story, but I think that it is also a shared event, right? Yeah. There is a need for a witness, and that collaboration is, I don't think I'm superimposing that with the people that we very carefully select, by the way, to follow. It is not everybody that should be in a documentary film. It is not every film that should be made.
You came up with the idea to do Boys State. Where did that kernel come from?
An article in the Washington Post.
Okay. And was it about the Texas Boys State?
It was about Texas Boys State seceding from the United States.
Right.
And it was a big story for a minute, a hot minute. And I was like, that's funny, but it's telling. And we thought, what an interesting world.
You know, Trump had just been elected the first time, and this story sort of offered us sideways into politics because it was young people and because it was this one place where, like, in real life, people were gathering who had very different, you know, they were having, it was sort of right where the right left met and had to have conversations with each other. That was interesting, but mostly it was like the teenager piece of it. I think what we did not know is like how it was going to end up being a portrait of masculinity on some level at that time, right around Me Too. So that was really interesting.
I wrote quickly. We wrote a treatment, and I was working with another company at the time, and I shared that with them, and they kind of jumped on it, and then they offered us a really shitty deal. And it was really hard to walk away from that.
I said no immediately, though.
Yeah,
I was like, absolutely not.
But, you know, it's like when
Absolutely
you're
not.
desperate, you're like, you want somebody to believe in you, but, you know, and I've made bad deals. But then we got, you know, Concordia bit. And this is kind of the first time, I think, I mean, there's like it's a little controlled, the camera work, and like less run and gun than other work that we had done. And this was like an intention already to sort of explore what the visual, both the iconography of the American Legion, sort of old fashioned, but also these kids who are very much of the moment in their own ways. And so that tension, there's a lot of tensions in the film, the tension of playfulness and sort of comedy, ludicrous comedy of like teenage boys in Texas jerking off and doing stupid stuff. And then like actually it being a really powerful prism into political division and masculinity. So the sort of those tensions were in the article.
I think that the value of doing the casting process was Concordia could then see, oh, I would watch these guys sort of do anything. So we knew there was going to work on some level as a character study, and our access was so complete with them as people. I think that Concordia was taken with that too.
The interviews shot in casting were foundational for the film, though, and it's been my experience too that sometimes those first conversations are reveal things that you don't get subsequently. We had to shoot a Girl State casting reel, even though. Like
Apple wanted it.
We had done development work, we had access, but they're like, no, we want a casting reel, and we're like, oh shit, you know, and we had to do the same thing, and you think it would be just green light, but there were compelling subjects in that reel, but it still to get the green light required a lot of cajoling, even like Davis at Concordia having to like nudge them. And like I told Amanda we have to make the film too, because no one pays for Verité films. Why would, you know?
Before they're made.
And certainly no streamers do. And I thought this is like our one chance with Girl State to ever make a Verité film that is financed by a streamer. Never again we'll have that chance. I'm pretty sure of it.
Well, things change. You know, they change rapidly. The world that Boise State launched into, I mean, Boise State made such a massive, it was like one of those, it's like a meteor, it felt like to me. From here in Austin, you know, Boise State came out 2018?
2020, it premiered January. Shot in 2018.
And that's probably, okay, that makes more sense now. That's probably why it felt like such a meteor. It was such a huge story in January of 2020, and then the world changed immediately 6 weeks later. But it was a huge impact tonally in that you were dealing with the Trump election in this really interesting kind of sideways way that said, how did we get here? Well, let's take a look at the microcosm of these teenage boys that represent all of us in this strange way, and it shows how we got here. Me Too being such a stark contrast. And then the price tag of the big sale that you guys made. Like that sort of thing, the twofer, and the fact that it's formally and tonally a very classic documentary. You know, you didn't go out and you know, throw all the different razzle-dazzles at it the way I would have felt I needed to kind of make a splash. You play it pretty straight, and the subject matter rises to meet you, and you're there because you're great filmmakers who knew how to cast and knew how to point and knew how to position yourself and edited something that really got the most out of it. I know Overnighters changed your career. How did Boise State change your career again?
I mean, you mentioned the price tag, and I think we wish the price tag had never been publicly disclose, because
and it's not fun to talk about.
It kind of puts a target on your back. I mean, it's also, obviously great, and in the sort of Hollywood ecosystem, that's the ultimate metric, right? Is like, what's your value, or how much do you make? But I think that we met a moment in ways that we never anticipated, and we're the beneficiaries of a new streaming service and A24's marketing muscle, and that again is like. Just feels like a kind of planetary alignment. Yeah, I don't know.
Let me say that we don't see it. I understand totally what you mean about feeling like you have a target on your back. I speak for myself only, but I can guess I'm not the only one. We did not see it as something to target or as something to be jealous or angry or frustrated by. If anything, it was aspirational, and it showed that documentary can make the kind of crossover impact.
I know. I guess I view it with nostalgia now that a streamer would buy a film about people who aren't famous, about a story we don't know.
No one dies.
It's an anomaly, and I recognize it for that, and I feel very fortunate that we're the beneficiaries, and because that's always the films that we have made and want to continue making, unscripted films about people who aren't famous already or infamous. And I'm kind of a little mournful because I don't know if our ecosystem has much room for those kinds of, like the world, the culture, the systems have evolved in a way, and I feel lucky that we've been able to build our sort of haphazard career and journey off those kinds of films, like The Overnighters, which again, similar in a way. I still long to get back to that kind of filmmaking, and I actually long to go back to, these are huge crews, that film in particular, I loved it. Working with a giant crew, but I also long to go back to the days of working by myself with Amanda, no one else, and just seeing where the story takes me.
Where we're at now. So
we are.
So the Boys State thing was meaningful to us too. I just have to say this personally. It's the first film our kids gave us the thumbs up on, and so that was great. To make films that. Could provoke intergenerational conversation, because there were some young people at the film last night, and I really liked that about the last couple films we've made, is that we're having my parents, my generation, and my kids all having these conversations about politics or about the climate or about teachers or about journalism or whatever the film is asking you to talk about. I love that, because young people don't necessarily gravitate towards documentaries. And so that's exciting.
I'm still turning on the question we got last night from the teacher about the story of Middletown, of this sort of collaborative investigative endeavor, and the way these kids make a film together. Like, that's not how people create media together. Young people create media for themselves or for their friends, but it's sort of done individually. And so what is the model of collaborative work? What will documentary become? I think that's a great question. I don't have an answer for it, but I am wondering how young people will work together in the way that we see them work together in Middletown to make an investigative documentary. Like, what is that media? What is that model of tomorrow?
It's amazing to be this far into a career and still be asking yourself, what is it that you do? What is a documentary? And the buyers having one definition that's also always evolving. Is it entertainment? Is it journalism? Is it hagiography? And I don't think there's any one answer, obviously, but I do think it's interesting that we're still questioning that,
Yeah. We've talked a long time already. We have not talked almost at all about Middletown. Middletown is your new film. Premiered at Sundance. It's playing here at Doc Days. It is an incredible look at teenage activists, an inspiring teacher. It's an archive-heavy film. It is about a subject matter that dominated the lives of these high school kids' high school experience in 1991 through 1997, but it's a microcosm of a major issue that dominates our lives today with the environment and corporate control and corruption and greed. The people who are in this room saw the film last night, and we got to experience a great Q&A last night, and you've shared a little bit about it. The people who will watch this podcast will have to wait to see the film because you're still seeking distribution. Can you share with us, to wrap up, what Middletown has meant, the process of making Middletown on the heels of Girls State and Boys State, the Overnighters, getting kicked by Brett Morgan, all the different, this is where you're at in your career right now, and this is, we become traveling salesmen during distribution, right? We go from town to town, selling our wares, answering the same questions, looking for connection. Where do we find you now in distribution with Middletown? Just to wrap the whole thing up.
Amanda describes Middletown as our unplugged album, right? It's a little throwback. I mean, doesn't have kind of the show value of Boys State or the kind of 11 register crazy, as crazy, but maybe not Overnighters crazy. So where does it fit? I mean, we're trying things that we're excited about. We did one thing in particular that we built a kind of hot tub time machine. I'll call it that, but it was a sort of a strategy to kind of invite the subjects who are now our age to look back on a teenage experience, and how we did that formally, and was an interesting challenge, and something that we're looking for in taking on new projects is like, they scare us. We don't know how to do it. They demand formal innovation or things that we haven't tried before that feel risky. And the work feels necessary to us, like it will have meaning in the world. Not that we're not always tempted to kind of find easier ways to sell out, but I think we want, it's 2 years or more of your life, and you want to feel like you put something good into the world. And this felt like that kind of story that hopefully, if we got it right, it would put something good in the world. That's why we wanted to do it.
Is there a final thought or a final message that you hope people take away from what you put out into the world through Middletown? Or is there a thread through all your work that kind of speaks to the message that you're putting out there?
That's a big question.
Yeah, I like to bring the big questions at the very end.
I mean, the sort of like, what's the thread through all of your work thing? It just throws me. Like, I guess it's us, right? With this film in particular, I am deeply refreshed by Fred and his state of being in the world as an adult, and found that being around him through the process of making this has helped me kind of make sense of the world that we're in right now and how to be useful as a storyteller, but also as a good person, or trying to be a good person. The reflection back, I think I talked about this last night, of like thinking about who you are as a 50-something to who you were as a 18-something. Obviously, that's stuff we're thinking about because we have a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old kid, but it's different parenting that teenager than actually reflecting on your own younger self. And would you be making yourself that person then proud now as a, I hate the word, but middle-aged person?
Would you be?
I think I would, which is also took me a while to be cool with saying that, because I was definitely a more radical and much ragier person at the time. So why have I calmed down? Because frankly, there's more to be enraged by. And I think it's that I've found meaning and I found people. So that is the good thing about getting older, right? Is you do know more of who you are, and what's important to you. So that's the good thing about being older, I think, and being this far into the business, is that we're not going to make every film. God, I have to think about that. I'm going to come up with like 8 more answers when we stop filming.
I think that was a great answer. Middletown is very much about the past and the present, and seeing. You said this last night in the Q&A. You didn't know what the third act was when you started the film. I don't think any great documentary knows what the third act is when they start.
I hope they don't, actually.
That's right. Because you're just filling in an outline if that's all you're doing, right? So what is the third act? And the third act is almost always a moment of reflection. And for a film like this, where it's definitely a moment of reflection, because you have created a time machine, and it's time for people to step out of the hot tub, towel off, and decide, like how wrinkly their fingers got and how far I want to stretch this metaphor. And that's what your subjects do, right? They all changed, and they saw that change in a way that most of us don't get the opportunity to do, right? It's why high school reunions are both so terrible and so weirdly wonderful.
Right. I'm still trying to figure that out. Whatever that space is, it was interesting to me. I mean, we can nerd out on a lot of like documentary stuff about like, past tense stories and why we tell them versus the present tense stuff of Verité, which is a very different project. And we struggle more with like past tense stories. Like, why tell this story? Why does Middletown need to be a story in the world? Like, it happened, great. What is the value of telling it now in 2025? And so that's a different challenge, right? And so every film has a different challenge. Who's going to care? Why are you making it? But really, the who cares is like the number one thing you got to figure out for yourself, and hopefully that love, passion, whatever it is, will make it out of your body into the film and into the room in the theater.
We are wrapping up there. Jesse, any final word?
No.
Final.
All right. Well, you guys are going to hang up.
We didn't. Sorry, I was going to say we didn't get to my religion. But when you were describing sort of the meaning of the work, I mean, I do think. I don't have a closing. It would take us on another digression, which I don't want to go on now. That'll be a chapter 2 of this discussion, Keith.
I'm going to hold you to that because I have loved every discussion we've had over the last couple of days. I look forward to more chapters.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Keith.
I'm sorry I didn't open up to questions, but I was having such a good time talking to them. I appreciate you guys putting up with that.
Thank you, guys.
All right. That was Amanda McBaine and Jesse Moss. And that was a great conversation. I just really enjoy the opportunity to chat with other filmmakers and to get a sense of what's going on in the industry, just get into people's process. There are so many places that are similar to how I approach documentary filmmaking, and then so many things that I'm learning every time we do this. So, sorry Ben isn't here this episode, but next time on Doc Walks, we're going to reverse roles, and Ben is going to take you on a walk without me. He's up in Kansas City, and he's walking with writer and filmmaker Kevin Wilmot. Doc Walks is created, produced, and edited by my friend Ben Steinbauer of The Bear.
Hello. And my friend Keith Maitland of Go Valley.
And we couldn't do it without editorial help from Juliana Rios. Thanks for tuning in.
Follow us at Doc Walks Pod on Instagram, X, and YouTube.